Well, good evening, ladies. It's not many, but you're here. And gentlemen. And I want to say is welcome to the Taxi and Limousine Commissioner for coming one of the few times that, and the few commissioners that pay much attention to our needs. Gentlemen, we have always been complaining to each other about what our problems are, and the Taxi Workers Alliance made it a appointed duty to get the commissioner here to speak to you fellows. So I want you to give the Taxi Workers Alliance a round of applause for doing this job here. And the commissioners and their colleagues for coming out to hear what our points and our problems are. So gentlemen and members, welcome. This is our, as you guys know, our new office, and we're about to start a program here that will be beneficial to all of us. So have a great day and speak in direct points. Do not confuse the situation, and let the commissioner hear what you have to say. All right?
Hi, everybody. Hi. I didn't hear that. Hello, everybody. Hello. Okay, now that sounds like a union hall. Okay. So as Beresford said, this is the first time. Now, you know, we've been organizing in the taxi industry since 1996. And the Taxi Workers Alliance has been around since 1998. And we're so honored that this is the first time that we have had a Taxi and Limousine Commission chairperson come to meet with us in our union hall. So, you know, the running line for us is we work in an industry where those who oppose us have a lot of money and have a lot of power. They pay their lobbyists in 1 month, probably equal to what we pay our staff in 1 year. So it takes a lot of work to find people in government that are willing to be open to the voices of working people. And you know, this moment is not lost on us that we've reached the point where we can have a sitting chairperson of the TLC, our regulator, you know, come to our space and hear from us. So with that, Commissioner Joshi, I really want to thank you on behalf of the Taxi Workers Alliance. These are some of our finest members. They represent a percentage of our membership. And I have to tell you, many of the men and women sitting in front of you, majority, I think, drive the night shift, got up early just to come to this meeting today. We want to thank you for that. Many of them also work the day shift. I know we have our application in for a taxi stand. They drove around quite a bit looking for parking and, you know, ended their shift early to make it to this meeting. And I assure you, you know, we took registrations for this meeting, and I assure you that the people, the members that are in this room, not only represent themselves and their families and the public that they serve, over 2,000 people, each one individually every single year, but in addition to that, they are some of the leaders that are out there for the 50,000 taxi drivers. And so what gets talked about in this room will be echoed much louder by their voices than certainly this microphone. So I'm really happy to see all of you here today. So actually first I'd like to maybe ask you if you could introduce other members of your staff who you brought here today.
First of all, it's a real pleasure and an honor to, and I'm going to say invited, but I'm going to out Rita B because I had to force myself upon her. Because I was in an elevator and I commented that she hadn't yet invited me to see the new space, and several of her members were with her. And so in that moment, she was forced to send me an invitation. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't do anything alone. We have a really dedicated staff at the TLC, and I think some of the faces I'm sure are familiar up here, but they really represent the people that listen to the information that we get from each of you and the comments that we get on your rules, as well as the people that go out to talk to bases and garages and drivers and get out of 33 Beaver and into the world where people have everyday problems driving taxis. So let me start with Erica Lavalle, who is with our outreach unit, and Charlie Furrier. I always mess your last name, Fury. Charlie, just call him Charlie. Charlie's with legal counsel, and he has spent a lot of time addressing issues with revocations and suspensions and adjudications. Chris Wilson, the esteemed general counsel, makes all the big decisions. And some of you may remember Ashwini Chabra, who was our former Deputy Commissioner of Policy, and I'm very happy to welcome Jeff Rock, who's going to be our new Deputy Commissioner of Policy. Weighing lots of different factors and helping to form the agency as we move forward with a world that, for drivers, is changing every day, and we need to change with it.
Great, thank you, and welcome to all of you. So, we thought, you and I could just have a conversation to begin with. And then we definitely wanted to open it up to all of you, who may have comments and questions. But I'll just, to get it going. So, on this agenda, we've listed out a lot of different topics, right? And this is not even everything. And as one of our members reminded me, I did not explicitly put the owner must drive rule and some of the issues people have had with the number of shifts and the fine amount in order to be excluded. The list could go on, but what I really want to point out is how problematic it is that the list could be so long. I think it's a reflection that this is a really tough job, a really tough city, really tough industry, and drivers are constantly having issues. I mean, 2 years ago, we finally got a fair raise when you were general counsel and did really great work on that proposal with us. And it was a raise we had not had in 8 years. And here we are 2 years later, and what we're seeing is traffic is much slower. According to the New York Post, a taxi in the day shift averages 5 to 7 miles per hour. But of course the lease has not come down. We're seeing Uber more and more really take over, particularly the black car industry, but also as a result of the app, and that combined with the fact that at the hotels for the past 10 years, doormen have been giving the jobs away from what used to be for yellow cabs, and the stands will still say yellow cabs, but you never see a yellow cab actually standing out there. To the airports where we know Port Authority, every time they've done undercover sting operations, many dispatchers have been arrested for taking bribes. And so with the traffic congestion, the kind of the unbridled competition, right? The green cabs came in. We expected that the number of for-hire vehicles would otherwise come down. So it would be the same group of cars but operating with a different permit. There's been talk, the state had passed a law allowing the city to sell more medallions. So we're just really concerned that the people who are out there working are really getting squeezed. And here we are less than 2 years after a raise and still not getting enough time to really allow that raise to sink in and elevate people's incomes. So all of these different issues in terms of, the traffic, I would kind of like to start there, because I know we have a lot of day drivers in particular that are here. Around, with Vision Zero, two sorts of things have happened. I mean, there are new rules that have come in that, we have a lot of concern that it's going to lead to many more suspensions and revocations. And so for the people that are working, it's harder to make your lease, make the gasoline, your other expenses, and make a living. And then on the other hand, you're constantly worried and scared you're going to get pulled over by the police. I hear from drivers all the time, they'll see 5 cars pulled over by the NYPD, and 4 out of the 5 will always be a yellow cab. And I mean, we've all seen it. Even in places where, we've heard so many stories of drivers being told, well, yeah, we know you were driving with the flow of traffic, but, you're driving yellow, the other guy is not. And we know that's the only reason that they're being pulled over. Then at the same time, the city council has, enacted rules that it has passed laws under Vision Zero where, there will be more points, there will be the combination of the points between the DMV and the TLC. And so there's just a lot of concern that people are losing the job security. It's getting harder and harder to keep your license. And we know that when lots of drivers right now with a hack license are going from hack to FHV in order to maybe drive Uber or what have you. Used to be for years, if you had a hack license, you could drive yellow or FHV because everybody knows it's the harder license to get. You spend more money, more time, the classes, everything. And yet it has felt for us overnight that the value of that license has been devalued. And now, we're seeing people get ticketed for that, but more importantly maybe when they go in to get an FHV, we're just in a lot of trouble they're having with getting their application through. And I don't mean the time involved, I mean where there's a lot more review of the application to see if a driver's fit to still drive. And we just think that, really strict, very excessively strict conditions and standards in order for people to get a license or to keep a license. And then once they're on the street, they're lucky enough to get the license, it's been harder to keep earning a living, because of the unbridled competition, because of the traffic congestion, the constant stops by the NYPD and the TLC. And so that, I think, really is the framework of kind of what people are seeing today out on the streets and really what some of our biggest concerns are. So if we start around the job security issues with the TLC rules and the revocations, because a particular question we would have is, if someone has been driving, we see many incidents where someone's been driving for a long time period, they haven't accumulated points, gotten any summonses, they might then have a time period where they do end up getting enough points that could lead to a revocation. Our feeling is if they have already put in the time and shown, even for a year, that they would never got any points, it should go towards some sort of a credit so they get an extra point reduction. And secondly, that let's say when you're going back to get your license, if it has been revoked, you go through a fitness hearing where you never know. It feels to us like it's the luck of the draw of who you get to make the decision. But there should be some sort of a standard. Maybe have people go to a class, like a relicensing class, And once, they complete that successfully, allow that to be the standard for why someone is able to get that license back. We just feel that, you can't shut someone out of driving for practically their rest of their life because of one bad period. Just feels really excessive. So on those two things, around the revocations and around the fitness and the relicensing, just like to hear your comments on that.
So I'll talk about the fitness review first, and that's something that I've had to take a look at since joining, well, I was with the TLC, but since becoming chair. And we're in the process of doing some major changes to how that works. Because I do think that when somebody, say they fail a drug test or they're revoked because they acquire a certain number of points, if they meet the ban, they've waited the 3 years or the 2 years, and they come back and they have a clean record, there is really, they sort of paid their dues and there's no fitness issue there for us. So that's just one example of some things that we need to look at with the fitness review process, and we're currently restructuring how that review process is done to address some, what would seem like disparities in who passes fitness review and who doesn't. On the local laws that were recently passed by City Council require us to pass implementing rules. And those implementing rules will have one effect. They'll allow us to combine DMV critical driver points and persistent violator points. So one of the things we've looked at in trying to sort of ameliorate the effects of that combination is, one, the local law allows us to give you 3 credits now for defensive driving course instead of 2. But, and we've had some discussions over this, but I think it kind of, to some degree, addresses your point. When should the look-back period start? So if you had a few violations in 2011 or 2012, but you get your convictions in 2014, should the look-back period stem from the day of your conviction or from your most recent violation? If we look at it from the date of conviction and you've had a clean record since your violations in 2012, then they drop off and you're allowed to continue to stay licensed. If we go back and look at the date of violation, we're actually going back into, history that may be in some cases 1, 2, 3 years old. And I do think it may not always be a proper judge of character of whether you're fit to be a driver today. So I know there was some examples that you provided to us, and we actually looked at them. If you look at the violation date versus the occurrence date, and out of the, 7 examples, 4 people would have kept their license had the conviction date been used instead of the violation date. And that's one of the changes that our implementing rules will make. But you bring up another point, incentives, and I truly believe that Vision Zero shouldn't be about penalties. It's an unfortunate part of it, but it really has to more be about education and incentives and changing, what we all think about as drivers. I know that, I'm not a professional driver, but I drive a little different now that I know, Vision Zero is out there, and I have to think about every traffic light and every pedestrian because it's a conscious decision. So it's made a change, I think, in all of us. And that's really that's the underlying purpose, and that's really what's going to make it a success or not. Penalties are just a byproduct. They're what happens when things go wrong. So they shouldn't be the focus of the Vision Zero initiatives. And that's why I think an incentive program is something we'd love to explore with you, and I think would be very valuable. And an incentive program that's designed around the point system, I think is probably very useful. We already have something with defensive driving, but I like your example better, that when people have a period of time with an unblemished record, that they be given some credit for that. And we look forward to exploring with you what we can do by rule, or supporting, if we need be, what we have to change through administrative code.
So, given the current environment, do you think this is something that we could pursue now, or is it something that wouldn't have to go through the city council, or is it the TLC? Do we know that?
depend on the structure, but to answer your first question, I know that the administration is just as interested in an incentive to get people to drive more carefully as they are, actually probably more so. So yes, now is a fine time, and depending on how it's structured, it could be TLC alone.
And so, what about the issues of kind of around, NYPD and even TLC enforcement where, I mean, even for years we've seen, we start with the TLC. I mean, every driver can tell you this story better than I, where we've seen incidents where somebody will be doing an illegal pickup, but the TLC will go after the yellow cab instead of the hustler, basically. And it really is one of the ways that illegal pickups became so common over the past 10 years. I think one, it might be helpful for people just to hear about some of the, how the TLC, how much of a priority are kind of going after illegal pickups. I know, for example, there's the tow pound contract and just the enforcement unit. But, one thing is we've seen Uber, for example, and, when Lyft tried to come in through rideshare, right, where they give the jobs away to private cars. We were very pleased to see you so aggressively responding to that and making it clear to Lyft and to Uber and to Sidecar before that in the city of New York, we will not let basically private cars steal jobs away from taxis through the use of an app. And we know in places like Chicago and San Francisco, other, Washington, D.C., where the massive, big taxi towns like us, drivers were not as well protected. So we've been really glad to see your work in that arena in particular. But one thing I've been personally curious about is I know there have been lawsuits that have now been filed, where members of the public have said that they were being dropped off by a family member and the TLC had pulled them over. And, some of them have, I believe, have filed lawsuits. And to be a conspiracy theorist for a moment, I can't help but wonder how much of that's been motivated by people like UberX and Lyft, where in other cities they get to operate using just private cars, right? And so if they start to go after the illegal pickups enforcement by the TLC in New York, regardless of what the laws say, on the streets, it'll be just much easier for them to proliferate. So given these new conditions, if you could talk a little bit about what the TLC already does and how you're thinking about it, if you think rideshare and the use of the app for private cars, if that still remains kind of a threat, in New York City.
Let me first speak to the rideshare. In New York City, we've drawn the line in the sand, and it's a lot of work, and we don't plan on moving it. But rideshare is illegal. If you're not a professionally licensed driver and you're transporting people around, that's illegal, and we'll seize your car. You don't carry the right insurance, you're not protecting the passenger, and you haven't gone through our licensing process. So that's unchanging. As far as our work in enforcement in seizing illegal, what we call them straight plates, people that pick up cars, pick up passengers, but don't have the appropriate license, we vigorously enforce every day. We have a growing team of inspectors. We've got a class of about 40 and another class that's training. We've added a squad that operates just out of JFK to pick up straight plates that are JFK, and we're working with the Port Authority to open up another squad at LaGuardia so we can pick up the straight plates that work there, as well as in the Central Business District in Manhattan. We do regular enforcement, and nothing about the news stories has changed our enforcement efforts. What we have done, which is I think brings clarity to the situation, is we're doing some retraining with our inspectors so they understand what kind of questions they need to ask when they stop a vehicle to make sure that probable cause and reasonable suspicion are established, because those are the constitutional rights of the people that are in the car. And that is just a training that will make our seizure power better, and it'll make the cases that we bring to oath when we seize cars stick rather than having them dismissed, because it's demoralizing for our inspectors to put lots of work in to get illegal cars off the street only to find out that an oath judge has thrown the case out. So we need to make sure that our inspectors are prepared and do the right investigations when they stop. And we've also added representation for them in the courtroom to help make sure that those cases stick, because they are a fundamental part of protecting the license structure that we set up and protecting those that work within it and making sure that they can make an income.
What about the issue of where the TLC is enforcing against, active, yellow cabs, right? Where it just seems like, people get pulled over so often, or even the use, and even the use of the the TPEP, what we always call the GPS, to issue summonses in the mail. For example, from the minor things, like for example, there's a rule that if you're suspended, you're supposed to turn your hack license in, the physical copy of your hack license, right? Really, especially since the new technology came in where you can get locked out, no one's ever enforced it. No one's ever really required that. People don't do it. Sometimes you could be suspended for just a couple of days because you didn't post a bond on your DMV ticket. So it just doesn't seem fair to have people that are working 12-hour shifts have to go to Queens Boulevard to turn that license in, and if they don't, then months later they get a ticket in the mail. Even if they have to pay $25 settlement, the point of it is that's an hour's worth of work, and it just seems really minor, I think the bigger issues where, there's if a dispatcher at the airport claims that you offered a bribe, and all they have to do at the court is literally show a copy of like a $5, $10, $20 bill, it's a $10,000 fine and a revocation to the driver. So I think just from, and whatever happens in the court, of course, stems from when you get pulled over by an enforcement agent, giving the right to airport dispatchers to summons drivers, which we just think is unbelievably unfair. They should not be authorized with that kind of a power over drivers. I don't know, when you go to Kennedy, it's embarrassing. You go out to Kennedy and you see a dispatcher just screaming at people these folks have a job because of the drivers that are lined up serving that airport, And not only do they get away with screaming, but in addition to that, if you say, don't scream at me, they get to turn around and write you up a summons. And, TLC will take your court for that. So, I know that's a lot of sub-points in there. From kind of giving dispatchers that authority, number one, and, but secondly, having the amount of summonses that the TLC issues to drivers and how high those fines are.
Drop off passengers, pick up passengers, let's address that, let's not address it through ticketing. That's not going to be a quick resolution, but at least we have that, conversation, and I can start talking with them about the need for areas around the bus terminal to just, drop off passengers. So that's something I can raise with them in the next, meeting I have. What the points you raise about enforcement, I presume most people here are yellow taxi drivers. So you have TPEP in your cars. And that is an enforcement tool. It allows us to understand more about comings and goings. A lot of what we see now is a little bit of inequity in the way we enforce. It is easier to enforce in the yellows than it is to enforce in the FHVs, which is why we proposed a rule that will allow us to get electronic trip records from the FHVs so we can be much more uniform in the way we address issues. And the electronic trip records would allow us to do some of the enforcement that probably is not done in the FHB world because of the painstaking process it takes to identify drivers in the FHB world. So I think that that will really sort of equalize some of the enforcement efforts, and it'll also spread them across to, say, I'll use like red light camera, which is an example. One of the concerns that was raised to me was if you're going to summons drivers for red light camera, don't just summons the yellows because they're easy to find because they're in TCAP. And when we looked at the data, the truth is, out of the people that have gotten summoned, that have been identified as running a red light, 1/3 of that group is yellow, and 2/3 of it is the FHB world. So yes, it doesn't make sense to summons only those that you can locate. We need to go through the work and locate the other ones. So a lot of what we need to do on enforcement is to make sure it's equitable and bring the other sections of the industry up to the same level of accountability that we currently have with the yellow. With PD, we've met with they have a new unit called Collaborative something or other, collaborative initiatives. I don't know, it's all about collaboration, as well as community affairs. And after we had a meeting with a lot of drivers groups about safety, it was hosted by community affairs, and many of the drivers groups complained that they didn't have a way to speak to the police department. There's no liaison, there's no sensitivity training, and there seemed to be a presumption that the driver was always in the wrong. So there was almost a reluctance to report things, and a feeling that they weren't going to get a fair shake if there was a dispute between them and another driver or them and a passenger. And the police department has started reaching out to different sections of the industry, doing some base visits, and they actually have gone so far as to give us the name and the number of a police liaison contact that we can send out to every driver. And I think that if we all start taking, or I'm actually not a driver, so if you all start taking advantage of their offer, that it would be a good way to directly tell the police department about some of the problems, and because ultimately they do regular education and refresher education, and if understanding what some of the obstacles you face every day in your driving is important for them to understand when they come across a passenger driver dispute or two driver disputes.
So I'm just going to push back a little bit on the red light camera tickets. So this is another example where, I mean, for us the unfairness wasn't just that it's the yellows that are being targeted because of the, can be because of the technology, but just the idea that we would be separated out from every other motorist, and you're still paying the $50 back to the state, right? In addition to, in addition to the fine, to the TLC, and then accumulating the points. And again, if you get two red light camera tickets in 15 months. That's after how many thousands of miles driven, you're going to be lost, you're going to be out of your livelihood for 30 days. And, the majority of the drivers now are either driver-owned vehicle operators, right, DOV operators, or owner-operators. So even if you're out for 30 days, you're still paying for the car, still paying your mortgage, all of that. So, here, to us, this was a perfect example of how you would think the fact that drivers, given taxi drivers and for hire vehicle drivers, have the best records, right? I mean, you guys have said it repeatedly, the TLC has said this repeatedly. You are safer in a taxi or for hire vehicle, per mile driven than any other car in New York City. And instead of being rewarded for that labor, and instead of really kind of being held up as good examples through that labor, it just feels like it's one more point of attack. And we don't know what to do to win. It's like, you do better, and they still point you out. Obviously if you do worse, a lot of this is also just I want to genuinely understand during Sandy. We were talking about this morning. During Sandy, I remember when, the gasoline shortage. Here are taxis that serve, 500,000 people every single day. New York City moves in part because we move New York City. And we really are the other face of mass transportation. When you have a shortage of taxis or for hire vehicles, it has an impact on the airports, on Wall Street, on the theater district, on the hotels, tourism, the restaurants. And so therefore the value of the medallion may go up, right? But yet, the drivers who give it that value have less and less and less job security. So we don't know how to really reconcile that logic. If I could just be blunt, because I don't know what else to be but blunt, right? It just makes me wonder how much of it is about the reality that drivers are mostly immigrants, mostly people of color. It's a leasing industry, so if there's a summons, right? It doesn't go back to the garage, it goes directly to the driver. If the car breaks down, the garage still collected their lease up front. So it seems like everything just gets pinned on top of the drivers by the industry. Yet within the city government, which should appreciate more the role that drivers play in mass transportation and how that supports the rest of the economy, we still don't find any respect or consideration there. And I think in issues of like the red light camera tickets, of being singled out, of all the motorists in the entire state of New York, being singled out as the people that are going to get a higher fine and additional points when nobody else will, we don't know how to, it's just so strikingly unfair. And it feels so deeply unsympathetic to how hard this job is. So how do we change? Where does that come from? Like, where does that targeting of drivers, you think, comes from? And how do we change it so that we don't constantly have this, and we're not constantly moving targets around this type of enforcement and rulemaking?
So I think the first part of it is something we talked about earlier, is working together on things that incentivize changing driver conduct rather than penalize driver conduct. But also, and I might, sort of an example of it is how we're going to approach something like the red light tickets. We are not going to issue summonses because we want to use it as a tool to give people information about what has happened for a while, give people a chance to change behavior. So we've designated a period of time where you'll get a letter that just says warning. It's not a summons, it's not a stipulation, and it's just merely an acknowledgement. This happened, you were driving, you got caught at red light, and so that next time that, you can think twice about, should I try to push it, go through that red light, or should I slow down? So I think that that's kind of how we think about it. It's more about education than it is about penalties. But there are some more holistic approaches that we can take working together with you to incentivize conduct, because ultimately the goal is not to target any one group. It's to bring up the level of driving for everybody and make us all mindful drivers, TLC license and non-TLC license. That's the citywide effort. And I think that incentives are an extremely powerful way to do that.
I mean, that's really good to hear, that would be that type of a change around the red light camera tickets. Would the TLC consider that for other types of violations as well, where there's more warnings? You hear from people all the time, like, I never got a warning. Sometimes you won't even get a summon, you won't even get a suspension for a critical driver program, and you go straight to a revocation. And so just the idea that there would be more warnings and more, opportunities for even a lesser period than a 3-year ban for some of the violations, are those things that you would be open to?
on some things, we have limited flexibility, but on things that we have some flexibility and it's aligned with our policy concerns, we'd be happy to sort of entertain some proposals you have in that area.
Good. I'm going to jump around a little bit because I want, others might have things to say. So, I do want to announce to everybody, and I want to thank, Chairwoman Joshi for her support. So you're the first to know that we were able to get oath, which now actually is in charge of the courts, right? And in the actual physical space at Queens Boulevard where the courts are. Thank you to, Chairwoman Joshi. We were able to get oath to agree to let us set up like a legal clinic for drivers when you go into the oath courts. And so there'll be, attorneys and law students there that can answer minimum questions and, make sure that people provided translators when you ask for them. Make sure that you've been given proper information on the summons and what you're there for. Explain your right to an appeal, things of that nature. So, but we also are planning to go to oath on a number of other suggestions that we have. Yes. One of them, and I don't want to get into a big conversation about it now because I know it's more old, but this is something that did come out even when the courts were under TLC. Just like we feel that in the streets, a driver is always presumed guilty, similarly when you walk into the courts, drivers presumed guilty, and you have to get out of that to prove your innocence, I kid you not, I've seen, we've seen decisions where first of all, the person is testifying over the phone and saying that yes, the driver had a turban and had a beard and so on and so forth. And the person standing before you, somebody who doesn't have a turban, is clean shaven, doesn't look anything like the person's being described. And we've seen decisions by judges saying, well, yeah, this could be the guy, okay, this has just been good enough. One really egregious one where it was all about the skin tone of the driver. And both the judge decided that the darkness being described by the caller was indeed the darkness of the skin of the driver standing in front of him. It's so dehumanizing. And you can't, in 2014, the fact that we even have to talk about this, just feels, whether you're coming from the civil rights movement in this country or coming from places across the world where, people died for their freedom and an end to that kind of racial bias, to see that exist in the courts of an industry where 94% of the people that serve it are immigrants of color, again, it just feels deeply dehumanizing. And so we're glad we're going to be able to have this clinic table out there. And all of this raises a lot of questions to us about how oath judges define credibility. Why is it that the driver seems to never be credible, 99% of the time? The passenger, no matter the inconsistencies, or it doesn't have to be a passenger. It could be somebody who's basically seeking to file an insurance claim, but knows if they get this quicker judgment in court, they can then bring it to the insurance company, and they require very little evidence to really rule against the driver. And we know this is now within oath, but we do want to bring it to your attention because obviously TLC is the licensing agency, and I think it's one of the other reasons that there's an impact of drivers coming in and out of the industry, people not wanting to work for a long period of time, which cannot serve the interests of the city, which should want more experienced, longer-term drivers, because that's what's going to produce better service in the long run. So, quickly though, on traffic. The courts are under oath, but again, they affect TLC licensees. traffic we know is mainly under DOT. But, without a doubt, it has a profound impact on drivers. I mean, 5 miles per hour average for a day driver. I don't know how any day drivers make a living with those kinds of conditions. And with Vision Zero, things have not only gotten slowed down, but, you just see bottlenecking of different traffic patterns in different parts of the city. To the fact that, so turn rights, all the turn right restrictions. How could a taxi be forced to have the same turn right restrictions that a private car would be? You're moving, people are paying for this service, you're moving people rapidly, which only helps the city move better and faster. Also the fact that, look at a place like Penn Station where we still don't have enough places to drop off and pick up. And then again, you have, people where they'll get summoned by the NYPD, and then that will lead to points, which will then lead to suspension or revocation. It's completely out of a driver's control. And we also know that in the past, the TLC has not had a lot of control over the infrastructure part of it, and the traffic patterns, and particularly like removing us from turn restrictions. I mean, imagine when Stan Schwartz was, the DOT commissioner, taxis could operate even in the bus lane, which is what taxis get to do in every other major city across the world. Looking at where do you feel that given this is under DOT, if you could kind of explain what is it that DOT gets to decide, where could we even partner, if these are things that you would support, are there ways that we could partner with you to really compel DOT and the administration to allow us to make some of these changes and lift the turn restrictions, especially for occupied taxis. Personally, I think for any taxi, because if you're trying to pick up somebody in a block where there's a turn restriction, those are people who are not being served. Letting us be part of some decision making as to where bus lanes are going to be 24 hours, and then you even have a bike lane on some of those streets, and there's no place for people to drive. To the issue of taxi stands, like there are places where you have to be sitting in the car if you're the first or second driver by TLC rule as to what a taxi stand is. Yet no member of the public is ever going to know that they can walk up to a driver at that stand, yet the drivers will still get summons. Then that could lead to, a parking ticket, it could be, over $100, which, and all that money adds up. So we would really like to see the DOT turn those taxi stands into relief stands and let people have proper relief, especially with no parking. And then meanwhile, keep the taxi stands at the transit hubs where you actually need more. Like all of Penn Station should be a taxi stand. All those surroundings, all the 4 blocks. And drivers' right to kind of access to, and the turn restrictions and all of that. But especially in light of Vision Zero and what that's doing to slowing people down, if we could ask if this could be a priority of your administration.
So I don't know how much control I have over DOT. But on the taxi stands and the relief stands, I've gotten some suggestions from you. I've also gotten some suggestions from other taxi, medallion representation groups that represent drivers and owners. And we have already forwarded all of those to DOT and are actively working with them to establish some additional taxi stands in areas that need them, and turning some taxi stands into relief stands if that would be the better use for them. But I do have to sort of work through DOT. I can't wave a magic wand and make that happen myself. We do have a lot of communication with DOT. I don't have, control over the DOT commissioner, but because of Vision Zero, I have a lot of joint initiatives where we work together, and that opens up the lines of communication. Their primary purpose when it comes to traffic flow is to make sure that nothing impedes pedestrian, bike, and other car safety, but also that there is improved flow of traffic. So if there are suggestions that you have, and I think they've held some workshops in communities, I think all over the city, where they actually put out a map of the community and they ask people to pinpoint suggestions they would have. So I would say that any suggestion you had would fall under that same rubric, which is something that we could bring to them as these are people that drive every day in the city and these are their experiences. This is how anything that would help the safety is always going to be a plus and well received. But also people with intimate knowledge of the flow of traffic, because that's what you do every day, I think will be regarded in higher regard because that's their experience. But if you want to put something together, I'm more than happy to take a look at it and present it to DOT.
The fact that what the fund actually would go toward from 6 cents is creating 20 different benefits, first time ever. Disability insurance up to $340 if you're out of work because of an illness or off-duty injury. A vision plan, a dental plan, a hearing plan, stress management, a 24-hour doctor's hotline, not just for drivers, but many of them also for family members. A special back health program. We know 80% of drivers have talked about severe lower back pain, is a major issue. To also term life insurance, policy of $10,000 that God forbid if when somebody passes away, the family would have some level of security. To accidental death and dismemberment insurance, when Sajjad, our member, his leg was amputated after he was hit from behind, if that policy was in effect, his family would have had some financial security, to get them by the first few very critical months. So we're, even though we don't always see eye to eye on many issues, it has meant a lot to us that we were able to, that the TLC passed this rule. I know, you were general counsel at the time, did some really great work on it. And, there are thousands of drivers and families that are really counting on the appeal. Unfortunately, we got a horrible decision by a lower level state court judge and my favorite line from that decision was, she said, quote, "If a driver applies for disability, it begs the question, why were they licensed in the first place?" Such a horrible, offensive, anti-worker, decision that came out. We're very pleased to hear that the de Blasio administration, had agreed to appeal the decision. And we know that you're working with the city's attorneys on the appeal, and we're looking forward with our attorneys on that appeal going through. And we can't wait for the day when you come back to this space, and what you're going to see out here are staff on the benefits fund serving 30,000 active full-time drivers who would have access to benefits. So yes, and we want to thank you for your support. I know you've been really great. So similar to the Healthcare and Disability Fund, I want to thank you for supporting publicly the Taxi Driver Protection Act. It's been another long road. But, we're pleased to see that the Councilman Landsman has reintroduced the bill. As you know, we are trying to get, because the Taxi Workers Alliance can never do anything easy. Like, we couldn't just look at the bill and say, oh great, let's just fight to win it. We had to come up with our own language for the sticker, right? So, we've proposed a different language for the bill than what was originally drafted. And, where our language, I think, would speak more to the fact that, taxi drivers serve the public, respect their labor. Warning, assaulting a taxi driver is punishable up to 25 years in prison. And this is another, really important issue for us. But that language for us is important, that particular language. I know you've already come out in support. You gave, fantastic testimony at the City Council public hearing on this, which was really helpful. And just want to make a public declaration for your support, the administration's support on the particular language of the sticker that we are asking for. And just to give everybody a sense, when we first fought for this in Albany, the fleet owners were actually against it. And one of the things that they wanted was no sticker. They said just put it on the TV screen. To us, it was about them promoting their TV screen and not protecting the drivers, So we've come a long way to the point where they now know they can't come at us because, we're confident this is going to pass. But we do want to ask you to support the particular wording that we are looking for and to help us really get the City Council to prioritize this bill. Okay, so around some of the other economic issues, I've already mentioned many of them. The loss of hotel fares, the loss of the airport fares, both because we're losing out on the hotels, but also because at the airport, the amount of hustling, but also rush hour. So I tell you, I remember when I first started in this industry in the mid-90s, you were on Houston Street, at this time, the whole block was shift change. And you would just see over 1,000 cabs, right, roll in and out of Houston Street. Then, they sold that strip to the real estate market, took out the gas stations, and kicked us out from doing the shift change. And then increasingly, garages, even if you really have a weekly car, you have to come in. So more and more drivers are doing their shift change outside of Manhattan. And so what that also means is by the time you get into Manhattan, especially when you're a night driver, and the first beginning hours of your shift are so critical because that's when you make the bulk of your money to pay back the lease and the gasoline. If you lose like an hour to hour and a half of especially the beginning time of your shift, you're just deeper in debt. And those are critical fares. Two things are happening. Drivers are losing that critical income. Secondly, we're losing our competitive edge. Because that's where you do have black cars that are single shifted, come in, during that rush hour, it's when people are able to come into particularly the central business district of Manhattan. So by the time yellows are getting there, people have an hour and a half head start right in front of you. And so some of the things we've talked about is, even during rush hour, creating even just one lane, on the 59th Street Bridge would be lovely, where it's just even for an hour open to taxis. Really, it will move the city, You won't see the rest of the bridge being as congested, so I would think a lot of the private car motorists will be pleased with that. We would be able to get into Manhattan, serve more people. Rush hour would just move more quickly. And also to do something about having, being able to have more access to more space within Manhattan where people can do shift change. Even if they're going to end up gassing out somewhere else, but at least the partners can meet in the day and the night partner, especially during the evening, rush hour. Morning time, you're going to go where the night driver lives. but in the evening time to be able to go into Manhattan for that rush hour. We need our shift change back. We need Manhattan shift change back. Like, it's had a big impact on our income. Might be another DOT area, but we really want to flag it for your attention, because I think through the GPS data, there's a strong point, you know, that TLC can, in some of these issues, you really can be our best advocates, because you see the full picture, especially through the GPS, of what's happening, across the board with all of the taxis. And we just want to really flag it for your attention that, that's another area we'd love to see you assign somebody that would look at the impact of traffic and, rush hour and just getting shift change back for taxis during that critical time. Okay, last thing before I turn it over. So, of course, medallions have a cap, right? And to raise it, you gotta go to Albany. We've just seen, particularly over the past few years, the number of FHVs have really proliferated. And so it just seems like, competition, and there's no sense of like the real numbers of, how many for hire vehicle and taxis are actually needed to serve this population size. What that's doing to congestion, what that's obviously doing to air pollution, what that is doing to driver income at the end of the day for us. So we're making a plan to go up to Albany and to really talk to Albany and also the city council about requiring like legitimate, real independent studies that look at these factors before more permits keep getting issued. And we certainly don't want to see, more medallions being auctioned off. I mean, there's just so many cars. There's just so much competition. The industry is changing. None of us are really understanding the current changes, but just to kind of throw more wood into the fire, we don't know what kind of a blaze that's going to propose and who it's going to burn out. But we're closest to that fire. And so we want to see the real numbers being studied, before any more vehicles are allowed out on the street. And I tell you, we also have a good relationship with some of the driver leaders from the green cab industry. Many of our members that you see in the room today don't just drive yellow. Some also drive FHV, black car or livery or green cab. And the one point that you probably will see agreement on across the board among all the different sectors of drivers is the unlimited competition is killing everybody. And that with the traffic and something's got to be done about that. When we go up to Albany, we're also going to bring up the fact that garage drivers have to pay $4.77 tax every day, and that every shift. And that tax, every shift, and that tax is a vehicle sales tax, which was basically brought in by Albany for like Avis and Hertz, and if you drive one of these vehicles. Yeah, like a rent-a-car. Truckers are exempt from it. We should be exempt from it. It's a no-brainer.
Our history there, where we had a rule that made the $4.70 be part of the lease. And we were sued by the medallion owners, and we won the lower level court, but we did ultimately lost at the highest court in Albany, and that's why the $4.77 is now outside of the lease cap. It's in addition to the lease. So.
Why can't these two take that $4.77?
Yeah, they can take.
Yes.
But you need something. You see the price for all garage.
So brother, hold on one second. So they're all itching to talk to you. Okay. Hold on 1 minute. So one last thing, right, before we open it up. Because I know that the DOV members in the room, they're not going to be pleased with me if I don't bring up this issue. The medallion removal, you enter a contract, you go to that broker, agents, you go there instead of going to the fleet, investing in a car and thinking, okay, I'm going to have this car for 5, 6, possibly 7 years, and that's going to pay off compared to me paying a lease every day or every week to a garage. But then the agent turns around and after 3 years removes the medallion, and you're left with nothing. And such a loss of investment. The TLC has to find a way of regulating that the agent cannot remove the medallion before the car retires. If the trips were converted to taxis, even after paying for the conversions, even after paying the fares, even after paying for the MTA tax, the 50 cents collection, even after all of that, the city and the state could still save like $40 million.
We actually have a public plan that we submitted to the state, and part of it is working with the MTA to leverage the accessible taxis for use as paratransit vehicles, and the savings is dramatic. It's about $33 versus $66, which the MTA is currently paying for every paratransit trip. So that's a big savings that could come back to the city and it provide a steady stream of income for drivers of accessible vehicles.
Okay, well, we definitely want to work with you on making sure that, if when the city and the state do save money through these conversions, we want that money to be used, thank you, Joshi, to exempt us from the new 30-cent surcharge, right, which is supposed to go into effect in January. That there's another way to earn that money, because for us the meter is sacred. It is the only source of income really that the drivers have, and it would just be unfair to to touch that meter for anyone else's collection. And already majority of it already goes for the lease. You got the MTA tax. Most passengers don't even know the 50 cents goes back to the MTA. Even if you have 30 cents more, and once they don't know that, tips go down. Shorter fares might come down. So we hope that, we want to work with you on this proposal, but I want to be clear, our interest is so that revenue that gets raised, it goes back to the drivers to protect driver income from the losses currently from the 50-cent tax and potentially from the 30-cent, surcharge that be coming into effect. We just think it's really important that if the administration as a whole would be working on this, that we don't want it to be at our expense. We don't want it to be that, okay, you guys, the drivers, you keep up with these losses, but now because you're going to convert the cars, we'll be able to convert this program and save a lot more money, but that money is just going to go back to the public funds instead of it going back to the drivers, without whom none of this could be possible. And so we really hope that that's a message that you'd be able to echo with us, both on Albany, but also at City Hall, that this is revenue that should really go back to the drivers. So, okay. So I know there are different folks. I want to open up.
Well, where we just did most of the issues, the biggest issue is the traffic plan. It's a totally flawed traffic plan imposed on New York from past 15 to 20 years. Like no right turns on the through streets. Like we pick up someone from the Grand Center, we have to go 6th Avenue between 10 to 6 o'clock. Like to bring them downtown or uptown or anywhere. That's making no sense. And how we explain to the passengers, I've been personally called an immigrant pug because of that, because I took someone, they want to go downtown, instead of going downtown, I had to go 6th Avenue to make a right turn. And that took like about 40 minutes. So I've been yelled at so many times. And it's so hard to explain. It's totally like a flawed traffic plan. Must be some study and just like a new whole traffic plan in Manhattan especially. Closing down Broadway wasn't a smart idea, everybody knows. It's like day or night is a gridlock over there. Also, these bicycle lanes, they're like totally impractical, like the way they create it. It sounds so good to have a bicycle lane. It should be, but not the way they create it, like make a left turn and they have their arrow signals and stuff like that. Exits from especially from the bridges, they're so congested because of like the exits are so tight, bottleneck, that's why. So there's so many things, like there's small points, they can do this small simple changes to make the very, very, like the big changes in traffic congestion or the traffic congestion. So there are, so there should be some cab drivers should be on some camera to just suggest what's going on right now. Like 58th Street exits should be like on 59th Street bridge. The bicycle lanes, the way they make it, like it should be changed. The Broadway, I hope so. Someday it will be open again for them, because the actual Broadway closing down the major city area making no common sense. You know? And also the exit from FDR Drive on 14th Street should be open. That's been a long time. 9/11 is way back. You know, so there is no safety issue. Like the entrance on the Penn station, right, like between 33rd and 32nd Street, should be open. So those are the issues I want to be like.
Okay, so please come on up and then.
And I had never felt so frustrated driving a cab in New York City the past few years. All the traffic, the harassment by the cops, and we should be thinking about how we can make it easier for drivers to be able to make a living out of it.
First of all, good afternoon. I'm not a cab driver. I'm here to say something very important. I was being told that I run an organization called World City Peace Foundation, and I'm talking about a health issue. When the cab drivers they drive, when they're young, they look very good. But as we grow older, they have very big prostate issues. We have large prostate issues because they don't have the leaving point, and I'm very happy. First of all, I must say that you're wonderful. I heard you first time today, and you covered most of the points very wonderfully, very nicely. And other things that I found, they say, well, as a consumer as well, where do you see the yellow industry in 2020?
Go to the panel. I just want to ask a question. Since TLC is not able or have the, I guess, the right way to deal with the DOT, what about dealing with the garages that we lease from, that's stealing from us? That make that okay, say for instance, if the lease is $700 for the week, they charge like $900. So I'm trying to understand so if it's so relatively easy to get tickets, I've been driving for 6 years. I've never had a complaint from TLC. I get a complaint from a biker 4:15 in the morning that I supposedly ran her down for the kill her in an ad. At 4:15, I go to Oath and I'm fined $800 for the first time I ever went before the Oath. So my question is, and another thing I want to ask for you, the 6 cents, the 6%, or whatever 6 cents, whatever is taken out for the help, where did that money go to?
Has brought in millions of dollars in restitution. So I urge you to call that number, and Betaby has all the numbers to report to us because we have a prosecutor give that. And second, on the 6 cents, because there is litigation, the money that's been collected is in a bank account basically frozen until the appeal is processed and we have a resolution in that case.
Yeah, people, we should talk afterwards, brother. Yes, we've held. Yes, we've gotten back money from many people through the Police Cops Enforcement Unit. We should talk separately.
Only question and things to the driver, I don't know. My request is wherever buses are allowed to turn, taxi with a passenger should be allowed to turn, especially on rush hour. And secondly, when people come into work, buses are allowed to turn everywhere. When he comes, there's another issue. They have a walk sign, but they do not have a car logo with it. So pedestrian can see is their right and our right to turn. Whenever we honk at them, please a little bit faster, you know what they say? Look, this is a walk sign. And we end up here, and we stop in the intersection. If red light comes, out of nowhere, I don't know where they come from, they scan your sticker and they issue you $150 tickets plus 2 points. And second thing, I heard in many countries Uber is not allowed. How come here is allowed? Because they line the front of the hotel pretending they're picking up a passenger, but actually they're giving bribery. The biggest hotel is Hyatt. He takes $10. If any taxi don't pay him $10, we don't let them pick up over there. And third issue, dispatchers at the airport. She knows it happened to me. I'm a sole worker. My son is in service. And what I've been through, he's screaming at me. Just I asked him, why you do that? Robert C. January 3rd, no one taxi in short haul, neither in a lot. And he was asking all the short haul to leave the lot and come back again. Tell me why. And when I asked him why you're abusing your power, give me your license. When I went out to get my license and things like that, I called her. And she was listening. He's screaming at us. I mean, we are human beings. We come from good family. And his age is very nothing my son. And we were dispatched last night at the LaGuardia Airport. If dispatcher doesn't allow the taxi driver to park and promise them to give them the OT, taxi driver will never park. Will move in the lane. Because they are the one spoiling them. And in the end, the taxi driver gets punished for it.
Good afternoon. I've been the head class around 22 years. And the revocation last 30th September I gave my license. And leaving the old case like speeding ticket, I was coming from Canada, driving private car. The 4-point leaving the issue like 2011 case. So I lose my license, they remove my license 30th September. And I have 3 children, they are in private school, cost like $1,200 every month. So land is $1,500 Jamaica, South Jamaica, around $4,000 to $5,000. I'm out of business like 2 and 3 years going on. So I became an old driving taxi in New York City. So I just want to get a license back and survive my family. And still case is appeal in the Long Island City. And then also some councilmen also working behalf of me. So I really ask you, sake of God, sake of Allah. Sure. Yeah. The medallion is fine. I release the medallion, the broker told me, if you don't bring the license within 2 weeks, I'm going to take the picture out from you, your position, and give me the car back, and take the medallion back, and take your car back. It's a bad situation, madam. Okay.
I didn't need my car.
Yes, myself is Nirupal. Good. I'm driving from 2006. Now I lose my license from 2010 and still applying from last 4 years. And I'm driving somewhere else in Nassau County. I applied 2 times and they denied. I don't know what the reason. I'm driving not here in Nassau, but always usually I'm picking my all pickups from New York City. I have so many regular customers, they like me, and they always asking for me to drive to city or airports. They don't have any problem. Whenever I applied, they just say like, you apply for license in 2007 and you have tickets in 2008. So in 2008, I have so many tickets. I know I made mistake. I was new, but all my tickets from Penn Station, not anywhere else. And from last 4 years, I'm driving, no points, no accidents, and still I don't got my license, and I'm waiting when they give me license. Maybe how long? 1 year more. Now I'm third time he applied already. I want to know like what's my mistake. I'm a taxi driver. That's it. Right now I don't have any. Right now I don't have New York City taxi license. But I have Nassau County taxi license. So tell me what's my mistake? I just want to drive yellow cab. That's my mistake.
It's true. It's true.
Hi, Tim Cavaretta. I have a specific point about Uber and the Livery Passenger Bill of Rights. Now, it states on there that you have the right to receive a fare quote from a dispatcher and pay that amount for your ride. Now, Uber basically acts as a virtual dispatcher through the app. But when you go in, you can enter your destination and get an estimate, but it's not a guaranteed fare. The way that the fare is calculated is virtually identical to how a taxi meter works, takes into account distance and time spent moving slow or stopped. Now, by your understanding, are they in compliance with the Livery Passenger Bill of Rights?
Time because there's people behind you, but this is an issue that is, there's a proposed set of rules that we're hearing on Thursday that it's all sort of FHB accountability rules. So it would be requiring trip records, no cross-dispatch, black cars can't dispatch livery, livery can't dispatch black cars is one of the proposals, a requirement that there be a base agreement so that Uber and some of the other apps that can access every basis driver would have to have some preconditions before that. I think some of it goes to what you're saying, the over-competitiveness, so that absolutely, so you might win one day, but the next day you might lose, because that's what happens when there's over-competitiveness in this situation. But Uber actually owns black car bases, and the black cars don't have the binding fare quote requirement. But they are now occasionally dispatching liveries, and that's why we're going to prohibit that, because the livery customer is entitled to the binding fare quote.
And would that be true for SHL as well?
SHL is
They're bound by the same.
They can be livery or a black car. If they're picked up on the street or by e-hail, then they're on the meter and they're like a taxi.
Right.
If they're dispatched, a livery base, binding fare quote, if they're dispatched from a black car base.
So if a green cab is dispatched through Uber, that's what they're doing now?
If they're, yes, but our rule that prohibits cross-dispatch would actually put an end to that, right? If they're a livery. If they are a livery, if the SHL is actually an underlying black car, it wouldn't.
So the SHL can be an underlying black car?
Yes.
30 seconds each of the questions. Only 30 seconds, please. So all everybody can enjoy our please, 30 seconds. Question.
Everybody said it. I will start with Randahab Hotel. One day they took 15 customers from my car. They took me like a thief. That is because I did not put $10 on the trunk for the dispatcher. I call it 911, I call it TLC. They also respond the same way as the doorman did. So this should be improved. And about the road, they say, of course, Bloomberg did good about the smoke, but they could improve that. And also about 401k, taxi drivers, they are not human. They should have 401k, should be law. They should have retirement plan. Every driver should have this kind of act. And they should have 401k from the money they produce instead of fabricating tickets for collecting jobs. Thank you.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Hello, taxi chairman. My name is Manjinder Singh and I'm driving like 8 years. I want to just give you a suggestion about the hotel delivery pickup. They're picking up our lot of fares, and every day I wait, and 2 hours wait, I have to pay the medallion mortgage, everything. These people are keep picking, and I will be looking like when I can get the fare. So I want to give you a suggestion, why not they have, everybody have a phone, and why, if they have a hotel pickup, their company must give them, like call on the phone, and they have in the trip record. And we have a right, yellow cab driver have a right to, like, if the over there livery to ask them, you have a pickup? He say yes. And we have to take his picture. And if he's if he's no pickup, we can report to the TLC, right? And they have a very clearly name over there at the window, and what time he pick up, and he have to show us on the phone that I have a pickup here. So this is why we cannot cheat our fare. And if we can make his picture and report to the TLC, and TLC should bring the hardest payment for the driver because he's work under the TLC. And my second question is, yes, my second question is, hearing about phone, just 1 minute please, just, hearing by phone is not fair with us, and we should have a state appeal in the federal court. And TLC should provide us all losses and everything if we win in the federal court. Yeah. We don't care about the hearing, but we have right to appeal. Second, please follow that. Please.
He's already given me 10 one of the major issues that I have has to do with misconduct. Administrative as well as regulatory, primarily in NYPD. And I really, truly wish that there's another piece that the taxi representation holders up even more and make the help and work for all sides of the industry and there's a big difference between truth and political. We have hiring attorneys,
representative of TLC, Patrick Joyce, right? When explaining the things, he couldn't solve anything. The time is running 30 days, right? And the last week, right? I have to pay because I don't want to lose my license. So if you would restore that and restore that to Manhattan only, and said that there is a zone, right? The zone, when you pass in the zone, I can't deny it, right? There is a suggestion if I am somewhere else, if I want to open up. But the thing is, they put it like I'm in the zone. I was here and the ferry is over here. In rush hour, about 1 hour, one of the rejections that they give a summon. And one more thing about accessible also. Before releasing the new car, right? Make sure it's not noisy. It's noisy at the beginning. My car is 3 years old now. Imagine.
One question. Yeah, I'll do one question, but before that, I'm going to, on behalf of my fellow driver, we extend our sincere thanks to you and the distinguished guests that came here. But the fact that you see that when you say TLC Alliance, is these drivers that are here. If you can take your time to come in to see the order, that is satisfactory. My only question here is there any way to form a human system, like a 10-point revocation, 10-point accumulation that end into the license revocation? Is there any way that you and your staff can go around, at least to do the first one, instead of just going ahead to revocate, the driver's license? I will ask you, on behalf of the society, as the gentleman was telling you about his kid, there are so many problems like that. My son is just a graduate student who do this job to help himself to, go ahead of his, life. So that is my question. My suggestion, together with the question, is please find a way to, instead revoking people's license, do one-time warning instead of going ahead directly to revoke. Thank you very much.
My question is, customers complaining, if somebody complaining, yes, has to write it because
comprehensive name, address, everything. Because on the hearing day, the person has to be come in the court, hearing court. Otherwise, the case has to be dismissed. Because we got lots of tickets from the police officers. If police officer do not present himself in the court, the case automatically dismissed. So you don't know who is the complainant. Maybe his boyfriend, girlfriend, somebody else. So in the hearing day, the person has to become present himself in the court. And another thing is one more thing. Suppose before 5 o'clock, we get sometimes we refuse. So somebody say 5 to 5, then we're going to go JFK. If refuse, they complain. And TLC accept that this complaint. TLC has to be realized when the person complains. If 1 hour or something like this, 5 minutes, say before 5, no, I'm going to be JFK. If I deny it, and TLC directly accept this complaint. TLC has to be think about this.
I have a question about the medallion owners. Most of the green owners, they are leaving their, like 70% owners are leaving their permit. But the medallion owner must drive, even though we are more expensive. We are, if we making $200 a day, we have expense for $150, and they have like $25 expense. And this is not as fair with us and all drivers, like whoever medallion owners. I'm driving by myself. I'm a medallion owner, but still, it's not fair. Green permits, they don't have to drive their permits, but medallion owner must have to drive.
Okay, thank you. Everybody who are still on, just give your name and number to Qayyum. We'll make sure to get your questions and submit them to the chairwoman.